Manu de Lorenzo is one of the many leads for our climate data and predictions for coastal solutions working group, and he'll be giving us an update on their plans.
Okay. Hi everyone. Sorry, I'm trying to organize my system here. Okay, can you guys hear me well?
Yes, you sound great.
Great. First of all, I want to thank Mike and also the steering committee for giving us the opportunity to present our working group and also for approving this working group forward. We're really excited. So the name of this new US CLIVAR working group is Climate Data and Predictions for Coastal Solutions. And in short, is really related to climate and the coast. This working group is the output of, it's been put together by 4 co-chairs that have diverse background and are listed on this slide. Clarissa Anderson from the Southern California Coastal Observing System, which brings a perspective of the coastal observing systems, which are obviously important stakeholders in this working group. We have Malin Pinsky, who is online with us, who brings also an ecological perspective on downscaling coastal climate projections and information at the coast. We have Siedlecki from University of Connecticut, which is also a coastal modeler, and so brings a more kind of regional perspective of how to use these climate products. And then myself, who I'm both a large-scale climate scientist, but also a coastal climate scientist. So with that said, why did we put together this working group? I think this is mostly a response to this report or this sort of white paper that US CLIVAR put together entitled Research Challenges on Climate at the Coast. And so with that in mind, the motivation here is that there's a growing, if you like, unfilled need for climate knowledge and predictions to inform both research and actions for coastal resilience and adaptations. And this really is the fact that there's often a disconnect between the climate science community that we have here in the US and also the regional climate modeling community and really applications of those data products for coastal communities that are really looking for solutions. So this is kind of the motivation. And with that in mind, then the idea is that we have an opportunity for the US CLIVAR community to really engage in more user-inspired predictions that are informed by real coastal solution needs. So with that in mind, then, this working group has 2 sort of foundational research blocks or aims. The first building block is really about co-designing and communicating climate information that is really relevant for essentially informing the development of coastal solutions that are also equitable. The second aim or block, or research block of the working group is really about the science of downscaling coastal climate information, predictions, and also uncertainties. We talk a lot about downscaling climate information, but when it comes to the coast, there are still significant challenges and approaches are all over the place still. There's really no consensus of what are the best practices and promising approaches. So this is really the second aim for the building for this group. So going forward, these 2 research aim or building block well align with some of the standing panels of US CLIVAR. The first building block really aligns with the PPI panel, and in particular with the idea of incorporating stakeholder needs into the science of coastal climate predictions. The second building block really aligns with the I never can say this one, sorry, Mike, PSMI panel, which is really about bridging the gap between large-scale climate forecasts and the relatively small scale coastal information. With that said, though, within the coastal observing communities, and in particular with IUS, there's been a real push towards this concept of detecting coastal signals of the coast. And this is a white paper that IUS put together. And so in that sense, the connection that this working group is trying to establish with IUS really is well connected also with the POS panel in terms of connecting and sharing the design of new climate coastal observing systems. And I'm not going to bore you with this right now, but there's a lot of movement in that area with kind of more cheap do-it-yourselves kind of observing systems that are really trying to bring information at the scale where people live. So with that said, when we talk about the first building block, for example, co-designing, user needs, it becomes clear that US CLIVAR needs to expand its reach and also its approaches to include community-driven research, meaning research that is informed by direct connections with the communities. But this, of course, is a big undertaking that cannot be done by a working group. At least not in the span of this particular working group. And so for us, the approach that we are trying to take is to link, essentially with a community, link with boundary organizations that have pre-existing working relationship with community and leverage these boundary organizations to help us really make a first cut at the understanding what are the user needs for climate information at the coast. And here listed on the slides are some of these boundary organizations that we are connected to, and we have point of contacts for this working groups. Without going into much depth, you recognize IUS, the Coastal Observing System, Sea Grant. There's a new Center for Sea Rise Solution, a nonprofit that is trying to create a community of practice for coastal communities and coastal solutions. And we have others here. And then not least, we're also trying to connect with some of these new UN Ocean Decade global programs like Coast Predict that are actually trying to deliver, for example, coastal prediction at the scale that people live. And so, of course, even though we're focused in the US right now, we want to connect with these global efforts. So with that said, let me just drill a little bit further down into these building blocks of the working group. So within the context of the co-designing and communicating climate information, the first task that we have outlined for us is to convene and engage with boundary organizations, as I said. And in particular, there are three things that we hope to accomplish. The first one, as I said, is to identify user needs for downscaling and forecasting targets. What do people really care about? And the second one is to essentially try to connect these targets with impact variables that are meaningful to these communities. Now, to do so, we will initially, under recommendation of the steering committee, focus on a set of downscaling and forecast target variables that are, generally speaking, related to the area of coastal inundation, heat waves, and also ecosystem impact variables. And this was discouraged a little bit, but I put it here because we do have some members in the group that are coming at this from an ecological perspective. And the way that we're also going to try to do it through the boundary organization is the fact that there are a series of projects that are funded in the United States that are doing community-driven research at the coast. And so the idea would be that through this boundary organization, we would engage some of these projects and we would use these as case studies to sort of learn and move forward our agenda. Talking about the second building block, which is really focused on downscaling coastal climate information, predictions, and uncertainty. We had originally 3 tasks, but we have reduced our scope to 2 tasks. The first one of which is really to explore and synthesize what are the new approaches that are currently out there in terms of downscaling, both from using numerical models or also data-driven machine learning approaches to really link, climate information, climate data, be it a projection, a forecast, or even current climate information to really the impacts that are at the scale where people live. So this is really going to be compiling previous work, talking with people, and engaging maybe with researchers that have ongoing projects in this area, and bringing them, for example, to our working group as keynote speakers or so forth. The second point here is to collect input and promote discussion also in the global community. As you know, under the UN Ocean Decade, there are several groups that are working on this sort of climate downscaling and coasts. One of them I mentioned earlier, but there are others, and so we hope to engage in that forum and make sure to stay connected. Moving forward, this is sort of the timetable for the working group. It's about 3-year span. And roughly speaking, in these 3 years, we hope in year 1 to advance task 1, in year 2 to advance task 2, and then in the 3rd year to really produce some synthesis that could help advance sort of a US coastal climate prediction and impact information system, or at least to provide some roadmap of how we may go about creating something like a climate prediction system for the coast. We are planning about 3 workshops that are roughly speaking aligned with these different tasks and synthesis activities, and we also plan to host webinars throughout the duration of the working group to really create more of a community of people that are engaged in this topic. In terms of deliverables, we have many deliverables that we hope to accomplish here. I just put them all on the page, but I'm going to just briefly comment one by one. So the first one is about the user needs. We hope to essentially write a report on what are the emerging user needs at the coast. This would include, for example, of course, identification of the climate information that is needed, but also an assessment of the current climate information delivery system. How is actually climate information being delivered in this period of time? And then synthesize some of the case studies that we are hoping to connect with. And the text you can read, but this is mostly intended for slides for people to read offline. So apologize for too much text on this one. The second deliverable is really about a shared roadmap for how we advance the science of downscaling climate information. Again, climate information here, broadly speaking, is not just current climate information. It can be projections, forecasts, and so forth. And as many of you know, there's been a lot of literature that has been coming out. This is an example from a paper from Passerella Italia in 2021 that is using actually sort of an AI approach to downscale essentially climate model output into the coast. But there's many other approaches that have been proposed, and yet there's still significant challenges that mostly are related, for example, how we downscale large ensembles from the climate models, because we know that now there's all the large ensemble business. And so the idea would be here to really try to identify common practices and robust approaches that are shared across both the climate and also the coastal modeling communities. And so hopefully this would be another paper that sort of provides some sort of reference points to that end. Moving forward, our third deliverable is really related to equitable information access to these coastal products. And here this is very important, especially for IUs. And there's the recognition is that a lot of these data products that are being produced for the coast, be it current data, but also climate forecasts and so forth, are actually not so accessible to the broader public and to the communities that may actually use this information. And so the question is, how do we make them more accessible? And so here, just as a provocation, I have put here a slide that shows a prompt from ChatGPT, which is a chatbot that you probably have heard of in the news. But it's really riding on this revolution of artificial intelligence and the ability of querying, for example, AI models like, for example, in this case, ChatGPT with real question. This could be a great sort of explorative tools to really allow for any community to really access data in their own way, in their own language. And we've had some interactions with Google, and as you know, Google is developing this platform called Data Commons, and within that platform, they're also exploring this idea of having AI systems that not only can respond to qualitative prompts like this one, but can also provide quantitative data and plots that are specifically addressing the query of the users. So this is, we're not saying that we're going to do a lot of progresses, but the idea is that we're going to brainstorm about this and possibly provide some guidelines. And who knows, maybe some members of the group can submit new proposals that go in that direction. Going forward, the last two deliverables that we like to provide, one is focused on developing an expert network that is really focused on coastal climate downscaling and prediction for the US. Here, really, the idea is that this working group is going to try to produce a forum for these discussions to happen, but we only have a 3-year lifespan. But possibly we could set the foundation to build a forum that will outlast this working group and will connect, for example, the climate and the coastal communities on issues related to downscaling, the climate information, the forecast, and the projections. To that end, we also are hoping to and this would be D5, to host a series of webinar series for educating and sharing this information and really bringing together and cross-fertilizing a diverse group of researchers in this area of climate and coast. So with that said, this is a kind of a brief overview of our timetables and our deliverable. And just to be more specific, as we approach our year one, what we hope to accomplish in year one is to host at least one workshop and a series of Zoom meetings to really start advancing this idea of the user needs and providing an initial report on these emerging user needs for climate data at the coast. We really hope to focus on delivering a high impact paper on this. We're also, of course, going to start our webinar series to bring speakers, diverse speakers, that talk about different methods that are being used for coastal downscaling. And in that sense, we hope to advance a little bit the second deliverable, which is really this shared roadmap for implementing best practices and robust approaches for downscaling. And here, really, the working group is probably mostly going to focus on compiling studies and also acknowledging the fact that there are a lot of research projects that are being funded from other PIs around the US that work on this topic. And so we'd like to find these projects and learn from what they're doing and maybe try to find a way to synthesize a little bit their findings. So with that said, then, one of the things that we try to put forward in the proposal is a kind of a long-term vision. This long-term vision is really about developing a framework for developing equitable, trusted, and actionable climate information for coastal communities. And so the task 1 and 2 that we present to really fit in a sort of feedback loop, where on task 1, we try to identify needs that are really for the communities. We try to co-design solutions. In this case, it's really the downscaling of climate products. And then, as we do that, innovate with new approaches. And then, this is essentially a sustained process that goes forward. And so hopefully this is going to be the approach that we're going to take in this working group. And with that said, I'm going to stop here exactly at 2:20. So there's 10 minutes for questions. And again, thank my co-chairs here for putting together this proposal and also for hopefully helping advance this work. One last comment I should say is that in terms of the membership of the working group, we have a list of members identified, but we are planning to send out invitation emails, next week. So we don't want to, publicly advertise who those people are before we, hear from them. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing, and thank you again, Mike and Sam, for organizing this.
Thanks, Manu. That was great and so prompt. And then if everybody could use, if you have questions, yep, I see Irina's already figuring it out. Use the raise hand feature, and then I'll be the MC. So Irina?
Hi, yes, thanks for the presentation. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well, Irina.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just wondering, so who is going to participate in the workshops? I guess it's a specific. What is the specific users community you have in mind?
Oh, this is a difficult question to answer right now, because I think the discussion of how we're going to structure the workshop and which communities or which boundary organizations are going to help us structure that is something that we feel needs to happen once we have the working group together as members. So roughly speaking, I can tell you what the goals are for the workshop, which is really to collect as much data as we can and feedback from the user communities. But the hows is something that we need to discuss as a working group, and that's part of our work.
If I can jump in here just to clarify too. I think Manu, is it right that for the task 1 activities, then you'll be looking to the boundary organizations, some of those who you listed there earlier. So you'll be drawing from Sea Grant and I'm trying to think some of the others on your list, the IU's efforts. where they're doing those interfaces with the end users within regions.
Yeah, so maybe to be more specific, this again is a draft, but the idea is that a lot of these boundary organizations are well connected to ongoing projects where we have researchers and coastal communities really co-designing solutions. So the idea would be that we'll rely on these boundary organizations, and then those boundary organizations are going to help us identify leaders or representatives of these coastal communities from which we want to hear and learn from. I think the best example of a workshop that to that end was actually one that was organized by US CLIVAR in, I think it was 2019 or 2020, that brought together more randomly a whole bunch of different communities, coastal communities, who really share their experiences in terms of how they were doing modeling, for example, at the coast. This time we will be more intentional and more specific really on what are their climate information needs and how do they want them to be delivered.
Okay, thank you, Irina, for that question. And next up is Dylan.
Hi, Manu. Thanks for the presentation. It was really nice.
Thank you.
Just a quick question regarding, you had mentioned that one of the goals here is to look at community needs at the people scale, which I think is super important. And you might have said, and I missed it, but is there going to be some sort of geographic constraint to that desire? Because I imagine that there's going to be a very diverse set of needs depending on where you're looking. And I wonder if that will spread the goals, or it'll spread the working group too thin, basically, by trying to address or think about community needs across a huge, geographic region.
Yeah, so as you know very well, the coastal community work in this area of climate and solution stuff is very fragmented currently in the United States. So as you mentioned, if we just went broad scope and trying to include everything, it would be really hard, and overwhelming for the working group. So the idea here is that we have to be adaptive. And so we'll have to explore a little bit what the options are. But the principle behind us is to leverage existing large-scale projects that are already working in this area. So I can, for example, provide you one of these project example that I'm involved with. It's called the Coastal Equity and Resilience Hub for the coast of Georgia. And that's a huge, multi-million-dollar funded project by actually a congressional earmark, where, community leaders are working with researchers to develop solutions and modeling and understanding how to downscale climate products, their needs. So we're going to try to select a few of these examples along the US to sort of work with, and that's going to be our starting point. And the hope here is that as you look at these case studies, slowly we will, a more kind of holistic picture will emerge. But given that this is the first time that we're trying to do this, of course, there's going to be some adaptive action on the part of the working group and some smart choices that have to be done along the way. So yes, complex issues for sure.
Thank you.
Excellent. And the last hand I see up is Sanjeev.
This was great. So I think instead of, I'm a PPI member, so instead of speaking on the behalf of PPI member, I'll speak on the behalf of we are funded. We were funded in 2020 by Gulf Research Program, and that lead PI is Chris Anderson, and that program focuses on some of the coastal issues that you talked about. And I think two missing things that I found, or we discussed a lot in our project. One was hurricane risk. So whether downscale data set would consider that associated hurricane risk. And I oftentimes get asked the same question, and then so that's one thing interesting for the coastal community. And then with respect to the downscaling, there are many downscale products, but when it comes to the coastal high resolution, for example, if somebody wants to look into the mangrove encroachment inside the coastal area, that becomes difficult. And also many downscale products are only for the land. So how to do both land and ocean at the boundary area, that would be something that we are interested in. And along that similar line, one of the coast application that we are focusing on the recreational activity. So is the coastal water is clean enough for for all the tourists to come in, and how it is going to get impacted. So can you elaborate on these two, like hurricane risk and recreational activity?
So I guess, when you say elaborate, the working group is really creating a forum for discussion. So I'm not sure, when you say elaborate, are you asking whether the working group is going to advance specific sciences related to hurricane risk?
Yeah, so whether the downscale product that you will consider or provide advice, whether that will also include the hurricane risk.
Yeah, I think that, when obviously one of the initial focus that we've drafted was coastal inundation. And so there's a sense that that's going to be connected to hurricane risk. But, again, one thing that we want to make clear, this is a user-driven research. So the idea here is that we are going to leverage the communities that we will be able to engage through the boundary organization to actually dictate a little bit the agenda of what if they want to see hurricane risk, we'll try to drill more into that, and we will, and the way we'll drill into that specific topic would be to collect input from researchers that are working in that area, and trying to understand what are the best practices and more robust approaches that are state of the art in terms of downscaling hurricane information. But we as a working group don't have the bandwidth to advance the specifics of the research. We just have the ability to create a forum around it, to bring those researchers together and help them better cross-fertilize and hopefully synthesize that information in a way that is communicatable to other communities that are coming online and want to have access to that same information. Does that make sense a little bit? So it's more of a process than, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we have time for one more question as we're coming up on 2:30. I see Dan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Dan Amrine at NCAR. I just wanted to say that, as one of the places that's generating these ensembles, there's a lot of interest here in thinking about downscaling all the way to the coasts. We have some work in progress to think about trying to make regional modeling more turnkey, to take those boundary conditions, for instance, from the large ensembles, but taking that to the coastal models where we're at meter scale, that's something where having a workflow would be really useful. And I hope this, direction, we can have, information flowing in different directions. For instance, it's clear that we would love to be able to have better models of wave climates in our large ensembles for these coastal models. I guess that's just mostly a comment, and that we hope to be engaged in this. I would also say another application is the Rising Voices Changing Coasts Hub project. This is a $25 million NSF project that looks at changing coastlines and focusing on co-development with indigenous populations. So that could be another good use case for you.
Yeah, so this idea, when we first started discussions, this idea of the large ensembles and how you downscale at the coast, right? It's right now, the reality is that we're computer limited to run these coastal models. And actually, it's not just the coastal models, because really we have whole hydrological coastal integrated systems that have to be run forward. And so we don't have the ability to do that. And so that's where the prospect of downscaling the uncertainty using AI-based approaches, where we use the numerical models to sort of train the AI models, but then we use the AI modules to downscale the uncertainties. This seems to be a sort of a promising avenue that a lot of groups are exploring in the US. And so we just would like to drill in and understand, which of these have real merit. And obviously, you mentioned a few examples. Of course, we want to connect with NCAR and other projects you mentioned. Our hope is that all of you will not be shy to emailing myself or Malin or the other co-chairs to provide us with good contacts, because we're going to have to review that information. We're going to have to sort of try to connect the dots and really understand what is the current network, in the US for advancing this work. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Manu. And I know there's a couple lingering questions, but I don't want to keep anybody over the 2:30 that we set on the calendar event. So if you have follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to me. I can get them to Manu and Malin, or if you have their emails, I think they're probably willing to take those emails if it's not too many, hopefully.
Okay.
And I just wanted to say thank you again to Manu and Malin for this great presentation, and thanks everybody for coming out.